So thank you everybody for coming to one of our therapist-focused panels for Save Against Fear 2020, SafeCon 2020, if you will, online. So this is a wonderful panel about telehealth and gaming. I just wanted to, as kind of usual for most of the Bodhana Run panels, thank all of you for attending our first online convention, which is definitely a rousing success. We have heard, we have listened. There are so many points of feedback we've gotten, so please do not feel shy about tagging admins in the Discord server or sending emails to the Bodhana group about feedback, especially considering that we are at this moment starting advanced planning for about 6 months down the road, where we are going to look at doing a professionals only mini conference that will span over a weekend. It will feature a lot of the content and game sessions, but it will be just for professionals. So stay tuned for news about that, as well as all the other training updates that are going to come that we've talked about in so many different panels. Most of our trainees who are here this weekend know this already, but a lot of great stuff coming down. So thank you as always for coming on board, being a part of what we do, and for letting us be a part of what you do. So thank you very much. And I will turn that over to Matt, Ericka, and Brian, who are going to be awesome for everyone. No pressure, right? So
I was going to say.
Yeah, no pressure.
Wait, is this live?
Is that awkward I smell? Oh my
Perfect
gosh.
time for Jack to leave.
Yeah,
That's great.
wow. Hint. All right. Be well, everyone.
All right, see ya.
Bye-bye.
So my name is Matthew Varrette. I'm a master's level social worker here in Canada. So my expertise is incredibly limited. But I am moderating this panel. And so basically what I was thinking was, if you have questions that you want answered but not immediately, you can throw it in the Q&A. If you have questions, that you want immediate but not so immediate, you can put up your hand, and you can always just type in the right hand side and I'll try to answer them as we go, or at least kind of pause the flow so that we can answer them as we go forward. Generally, I was thinking for this telehealth and gaming panel, we would cover platforms and options, HIPAA and ethics, billing and session running, and then tips and tricks are kind of the four sort of areas we're going to look at. And yeah, I was going to allow the other panelists to introduce themselves. So take it away, whoever wins the paper, rock, scissors.
Oh, you won. You got that.
My name is Ericka Busch. I'm a clinical psychologist. My day job is working at a community mental health center where I am on the 0 to 5 team, where we work with the youngest kids in our community. So a good portion of my caseload during the day is 5 and under. And then I have a private practice that is about half individual clients and half groups, where I run therapy RPG groups. It's my 3rd year coming to Save. Save was kind of my first introduction to this world, and I got a lot of learning from the first time I came here, and just have really appreciated all of the knowledge that I've gotten through osmosis and listening and hearing and talking to. A lot of your names look really familiar as they come up in the chat, so it's nice to be here. Thanks.
Awesome.
My name is Dr. Brian Quinones. I'm a licensed professional counselor. And relationship to this topic, I'm also a board certified telemental health clinician. My all play certified registered play therapist, supervisor, as well as like rational motive behavioral therapist, primary certification. I co-own the company Gaming Approaches Towards Education with Timothy Grant and Dr. Moses James. I do a combination of intensive in-home, intensive in community, and private practice, individual and groups. And so throughout we have, done a little bit of everything in the community, and now doing more together online and trying to, make that transition.
Awesome. Thank you. A little background about myself here as moderator. So I've been doing mental health work for over 10 years. Recently, in the last 3 years, I've been running Zoom session psychotherapy, I guess, with individuals with anxiety and depression, and intensive treatment for things like PTSD, OCD, stuff like that. My primary background is REBT as well, but I'm not allowed to practice that in my CBT intensive treatment, but I would love to. Yeah, and so for my private and for my public, I end up using Zoom to deliver psychotherapy to individuals, and that's about it, yeah. So I guess just to start, we can talk a little bit about platforms and different options, you know, that people can use for telehealth and for gaming, and what people's preferences are. So just to even open up the discussion. So for myself in Canada, I'm not going to talk too much about like the specifics for a lot of this stuff from my point of view, because in Canada it's a lot more simplified, and it's also a lot more just avoiding the USA, if that makes sense. So I used to provide Skype teletherapy before all this COVID kind of stuff. And one of the things that came out from my college over at social work in Ontario is that you want to use platforms that avoid the States or going through the States, because the NSA can pick up your all your information, record it, and then tag certain things. So a lot of what's going on in Canada is picking up platform that will only go through Canadian servers. That kind of makes sense. So typical things that we use are Zoom. We use this thing called Blue Jeans and Skype, all different types of kind of platforms. And then for gaming, there's places like Fantasy Grounds and you know, Roll20 and stuff like that. So, but yeah, I'll throw it over to those who are using it more for practice.
Yeah, so I'm in upstate New York. Our county I live in Ithaca, but we serve the broader community of the rural county outside of Ithaca as well. And so our clinic, kind of when everything shut down, did this what felt very incredibly fast turnaround. I think we went from like closed on Friday, you know, found out everything was shutting down, and transitioned to full telehealth. All of our clinicians have been working from home for the last 7 months. In about 4 days, we came in Monday, contacted all of our clients, and by Thursday, people were setting up appointments and out of the office. We initially, that practice has really focused on using Doxy.me as a platform, which I found useful. If you're in a private practice, you can use that for free, which is nice. It doesn't have all the bells and whistles if you're using the free version, but it's sufficient for some individual sessions. I don't like Doxy for the groups. I tried it and I wasn't a fan. In my private practice, someone mentioned Simple Practice. I use a similar kind of web-based client management program called Theranest. And I've mostly enjoyed that and found it really helpful. However, I also found that really lacking for running groups. It just didn't seem to have the bandwidth, and the kids would log on, and it was you know, it was more hassle than it was worth. So I ultimately ended up looking into the G Suite products, and found that G Suite has a BAA that you can sign with them and a HIPAA compliant agreement that you can sign. So if you subscribe to one of their kind of, you know, I think even the basic, but then the mid-level as well, that is compliant for using for telehealth. So I've been using that for my groups, and it's been great. I think the thing I really like about that is that's what all of the kids in our communities are using for school. They're all using Google products for their school services. The districts have all kind of bought everybody a laptop or a tablet, so the kids are familiar with it. One of my favorite moments when I first switched them into that is they came in and they were like all, you know, little Brady Bunch on my screen, and the one kid starts typing whatever he wants, and he says, "Can't stop me now from using the chat, teachers," and he just starts going off with nonsense in the chat, and I just was like, oh, okay, so you know how this works better than I do. And he got a real kick out of being able to use the full functionality without getting yelled at for chatting during class. And so I've been very happy with that for my groups.
Nice.
So it seems like we both came to Theranos, but at two very different angles with that. One thing and it will come up throughout, the idea of a business associates agreement. That is something that it's one of the vulnerabilities I feel that we have as professionals if we don't have that. And so keep that in mind. That will probably be something that comes up on and off throughout. So with us, we were kind of on a different timeline. What happened is we went down to BFG-Con, and for those who don't know, it got canceled. But it's also a 3-hour drive. Like we were going to do some panels, and we were going to enjoy the con, business trip. And we were probably about 20 minutes away from our Airbnb when we start getting notices on our phone. People were texting us about it, warning us that, like, hey, Maryland's about to shut down. I know you guys were going to that con. What are you doing? And that's when I look at Tim and I'm like, what we're doing is we're staying in that Airbnb because it looks really good. And I was like, kind of refused to drive back. So we used that time to kind of like brainstorm what we needed for when we got back to New Jersey. What the office needed in order to be able to sustain itself for whatever changes COVID was about to bring on us. And so I already had a gaming rig that I had built myself, but it had already been like a couple years old. And I was like, you know what? Let me just get a new computer, get a new laptop for the office. I know it's going to be expensive, but like it should be worth it. We didn't realize the full extent of how hard COVID was going to hit our office and our community, because it was like we immediately lost a lot of our support staff. Like, it's like, no, I got to stay home and watch my kids. Okay, cool. Like that's what's going to happen. So the idea of Theranest being it is more of a program management tool, right? Like if you need something to keep track of all your clients, if you need something to keep track of your schedule, all of those things, it was what we needed to help us get by, because it added some more structure to what we just lost. We have had some trouble with Theranest, using it to run groups, but not as much trouble to the point where we decided, no, we're not going to do it. And we noticed that some of it was really just depending on where we were at. All of our stuff is wired like directly in, and so that makes a difference for the most part. I think we only ever had to cancel a session once because of a storm that was going on, and like it was taking down like networks and stuff like that in the area. So I mean, that's also something else to keep in mind. If your internet server goes down, so does your money at that point. As far as I know, Fantasy Grounds was mentioned. We've been using a combination of Theranest for groups and individual, Roll20 for our kids on bikes that we're playing online, and I was doing, because I have like 3 screens set up here. So I would have my client here. I would have either Android, Steam, Epic, Xbox Live, whatever game I'm playing open there, and then like whatever else I need on the other side. So it was screen sharing the game, like the games that we were using. That was a lot of what we've been doing outside of like what we do with Roll20.
I've really not done a lot of those kind of more traditional gaming platforms or web-based things like that, so I have very limited experience. It's not typically my style in running a game. Actually, I've kind of always tried to use as much theater of the mind as possible anyway. And I had some, there was some sense of not sure how to trust the program and whether the kids would have access and how that would, in terms of confidentiality or risk in that way. I think this might be true across the states right now. At least in New York, we still have some emergency regulations open, so that they've actually kind of waived a lot of those. You need to have a HIPAA compliant platform, and it's kind of use whatever gets the job done. For now, they've been extending that month by month at this point, so we don't know at what point it will change back to it has to be compliant. But we've had that wiggle room where I know, especially in a rural community where the internet is spotty, the people that have the hardest time connections wise are probably the people that are farthest out of town. And I have colleagues who actually had to get incredible upgrades because they can't, in this part of the state, there are places where you can't get high-speed internet by cable. It's just not available. Like my mother is in very rural, one of my colleagues is, so she had to get a satellite internet system, which is just not as fast. So for some people, they would use just a more basic business Zoom when they can't connect with the client. If Zoom tends to be more stable, I do think, than something like Doxy. Doxy seems to have its temperamentality and a sensitivity to clogs in the internet that I don't seem to notice in the Zoom meetings that I'm in. But I haven't directly used Zoom. I haven't needed that level of kind of going off script with my clients. But I know some people have even done things like FaceTime or video chats with their phone in a pinch when they can't connect to somebody.
Because of our contracts, we were thrown in a very nasty position. And it was, we have state contracts for intensive in-home and intensive in community. And the state at that time was still saying, oh no, you have to go in the home in order for your hours to count. And yeah, and so that's why that first month was very touch and go for everybody in the field. And a lot of the company owners and other people were just responding. We were like, no, we're not going to do this. You're telling us to put ourselves at risk, and you're not, it's not like we had any, think about as soon as all this started, we didn't have any N95 masks and stuff like that. And so it was, you see this divide within the in-home field of people who are still going to go in the home, and then people who are like, there's no way we're going to do it. But we had to wait to see what the state was going to say. They said okay for everything else with HIPAA and with going online, but specifically with the intensive in-home and intensive in community, there was a lot of there was a long wait.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. For myself, as an example, Jack and I were doing this research study recently, and so for most of the groups who've been using Zoom and running kids on bikes and then doing more theater of the mind sort of thing, or linking to people either rolling dice on camera or that kind of piece. And I think one of the helpful parts about doing it on Zoom is that we can record things quite easily, like we're doing right now. And on top of that, you can basically private message people in game if you need to tell them anything secret or what's going on or that kind of stuff. Speaking of recording though, what's been kind of nice is that, or what kind of interesting just from a Canadian point of view, is that a lot of the American companies are like, oh, HIPAA, FIPA, all that kind of stuff. Oh, well, we will provide you our free service, but if you pay, I think it's like right now my hospital is paying $200 a month, something ridiculous, to get a HIPAA compliant only in Canada version of Zoom sort of thing, right? Because
Zoom,
I think
Zoom for healthcare is a thing
yeah.
that my agency has looked into, and it is, it's also, Doxy is also an incredibly expensive subscription for our agency. We were lucky to get a donation basically from a community kind of philanthropy organization to kind of cover. Nice. I think it only covered about 6 months worth of it, but they're hoping to re-ask for that. One of the things I really, you said recording, G Suite, Google Meet, if you sign, not the basic level, but kind of the next step up, which I think it's $12 a month as an individual, does give you the capacity to record a meeting. It doesn't, FYI for anyone who's interested in that, I find a lot of value in getting permission to do that. And I can talk about that, and I'll probably actually talk about that more in the research panel tomorrow, because we did that for that research I participated in. And that was actually free for the first 6 months, from March until September. Google just gave everybody who had a G Suite account access to recording, and kind of the fuller access, just to, I think, create openness and ability to communicate and connect. It doesn't have private messaging. So that was, the chat is for everybody. There's no way to kind of like give a sneaky side conversation. But
that was part of the that was part of the problem with what we had going on in New Jersey, where it was like the case managers and some of the therapists were like, oh yeah, we're using Zoom, so it's HIPAA compliant. And I'm like, really? Because we can't afford it, and I know you guys aren't paying for it for yourselves. So it's like, there is an amount of going back and forth, and it's like, okay, what is considered HIPAA compliant? And that was one of the things that we, as a company, went going forward from the start. We're like, no, because if things snap back in the other direction, I want to already be ready for that.
Yeah, didn't want to be left high and dry.
Yeah. We were scrambling here to figure out, say, just at my hospital, we were just scrambling to figure out what was HIPAA compliant or FIPA and all that kind of stuff, compliant or not, because, who do you ask, right? Because what's interesting about the Canadian system is that, so you getting so I'm with my social work college, which means I can perform the protected act of psychotherapy. So it's talking to the college as a healthcare, because here in Canada, maybe it's the same in the States, you're a healthcare custodian. So all information and all sorts of private one-to-one therapist kind of stuff is carried by the person and not necessarily by the job. So I'm always, whether I do private practice, whether I'm at work and I'm doing something else or delivering therapy, I'm the custodian no matter where I am based on my background sort of thing. So
no, that's different here. I think it's, my agency cases are agency based. All of that stuff stays in the building.
Yeah, I think because they're also, I know in New Jersey, they'll tell you the amount of time you have to hold on to your client's records. And so who's responsible for that? Is it the agency or is it the therapist? And there's kind of like a back and forth on that. Where it's
sorry,
like,
I think I made a mistake in speaking. What I mean is that my role in private and in public, I have to adhere both to HIPAA in my own way. I don't actually carry the documents with me as a custodian is what I mean. But I mean the idea that wherever I practice, yeah, the notes stay there, but wherever I practice, it's on me to keep up with HIPAA and that kind of stuff, not the job, if that makes sense much.
No, I think for the both of you guys, from what you've talked about, one of the strengths of doing theater of the mind is that you could really do that like over the phone, right? Like we aren't talking about using online and video chat and and camera work, but the idea is like when you take the trainings for telemental health, they do talk about having the cell phones ready, having like a backup way to communicate if the call fails. And then if you are doing something like theater of the mind, well, that's really helpful because it's not like you just lost your map. It's not like you just lost your ability to roll your dice or whatnot.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest saving graces of this experience being an international crisis and making us all kind of have to lift up our
issues,
everything upside down. Nice. And overnight I somehow became the informal tech person for the agency in terms of knowing how to deal with Doxy and get it to work when it couldn't, and that was interesting. But is that it really does, the scope of practice is you can, I'm licensed in New York. I could take group members from anywhere in New York at this point. And going forward, if I wanted to continue to do video groups, it expands the referral sources, it expands the capacity to meet needs in communities where there isn't someone who does this work, right? But might have kids who would benefit from it. So I think, longer term, there's some real beautiful opportunities for expanding access to services kind of into places that normally wouldn't be able to get them. And I think that's true for everything from this specific games and therapy in general to psychiatry, to the places in this country where there is not access to the people that give the services that the communities need.
And the biggest problem with when things start changing one way or the other is that at least in the States you have to figure out which states will be willing to play well with others. And some like New Jersey's not. New Jersey's pretty, I'm looking into the licensure in psychology, and I've already applied for the license for the permit in New Jersey. I'm going to apply for the permit in New York, New York is like, oh yeah, hey, come in to take the test whenever you want.
Give us your $600, please.
Yeah, seriously, right? But New Jersey is like, you know what? We're not going to take any reciprocity. And that's something to keep in mind with different licensing levels and different licensing boards, whether or not, one, there's reciprocity, and two, whether they're going to allow that service to cross over from one state to the other.
And I don't want to, I mean, we probably don't want to spend too much time on like the regulatory garbage pieces. I mean, it's important. I don't know how interested,
Nice.
It's a glampware mug. Have you seen these? These are amazing. They're all like different monsters trashing the terrain. Anyway, I don't know if this is interesting or not. If you want us, we can kind of move from that. I think,
I was actually going to ask, after this point, if anyone has any questions that they want to talk about when it comes to different platforms and different options and such, and then we'll move on to the next piece. Absolutely, yeah. Does anyone have anything they want to comment or anything they want to ask questions about? You can also write if you're completely bored out of your mind as well. It's all good. It's all good.
There's two in the Q&A.
Oh, wow. It didn't even pop up for me.
I was about to say, Matt, you were so excited about the Q&A.
It lights up, and then it didn't light up. Anyways.
I just assumed you'd be as excited today.
Oh, my gosh, I ruined it. Okay, so the first question is actually based on timing. So, okay, good. What was the option Ericka mentioned that has the BAA?
They all do. I mean, any organization, if you're practicing and using them as a part of your business, you know, that was a newer requirement years ago. I mean, it was like anybody from like if you had a billing service or someone that cleaned your office, you'd have to have a business agreement something, or I don't know what the second A stands for. It's just a sheet saying like, I'm working with this agency. They also kind of agree to keep things confidential and private and HIPAA compliant. So my Theranest, anybody that wants to work with a mental health provider is going to have this built in, right? Because they have to. But G Suite, which is a Google product, and G Suite is kind of like Google for business. So it kind of, and I think at the $12 a month level, like there's a cheaper one that's like $6 a month. It's much simpler. At the $12 a month level, it gives you encrypted email with a Gmail account. You can actually use it as an organization. I haven't done that because my private practice is just me, so I haven't explored that functionality so much. But they have a piece in their settings where there's, here's the document that it's a standard document, and you sign it, and they've rubber stamped it with their business information, and then they have a HIPAA compliance agreement that goes with that. And so you sign that too, saying we agree that we're being safe with this information that's coming and it's not being saved and yada yada. But what's really benefited that is that then now not just my email is kind of a secure way to communicate with clients if I need to, but also my Google Drive for my business email is secure. And so I actually was, and this is maybe spreading to another thing, but now I can, I made like a little Google Drive folder for each of my groups that the kids can access, and it makes the Google Meet, it covers that as a secure communication platform.
Okay. If anyone doesn't think that answers the question, they can certainly speak up or put an anonymous question in, but I think that covered it. Yes, the next question is, how does Roll20 fit into HIPAA compliance? There's another question about how online games like Minecraft and Fortnite might fit into HIPAA compliance. I guess what comes to my mind first, and you guys can elaborate more being in the States and such, is it depends on what you're doing. So one thing, I'll just separate like things like role-playing games and then from the video game stuff, because with the role-playing games, if you can run those on platforms like Zoom and like other things that are HIPAA compliant, and then use, I would assume you can use on the side things like Roll20 and that for only logging in with your character name and keeping most of the therapy stuff in the Zoom and just using that Roll20 for a map or for whatever or that kind of stuff, and then making sure that the participants are as anonymous as possible to each other, sort of thing. Or just avoiding that altogether if you can do more of a theater of mind sort of thing. The other, when I'm thinking more about Minecraft and Fortnite, it's that idea of if you're I guess like if you were doing a social group as part of a thing, you say you're going bowling, right? So you have all your HIPAA compliance therapy stuff, then you go bowling with your group, and then afterwards you decompress, you talk, you whatever. That decompress I talked about, that would be the HIPAA piece. The gaming part would be the gaming part, unless you're doing therapy within the Minecraft game itself, and that I would have no idea about. But when it comes down to it, when I'm thinking about Minecraft and Fortnite, when you're doing the activity together, that's the outing where you've given your confidentiality, you've given your permission slips, you've done all that kind of stuff, and you're not, unless you are adding therapy into it, or you're doing an activity. And then you come back and then you do the therapy piece, if that kind of makes sense. I don't know. What are other people's thoughts on that?
So specifically with Roll20, I emailed them several months ago about a business associates agreement. They never got back to me. So that would be a problem there, and a potential weakness within the confidentiality, because your concern in that situation is are they sharing your client's information, right? And whatever that information is, whether it be an email. So one of the things that we included in part of like our consent forms is, hey, this is what we're doing, this is how we're doing it. There's a potential vulnerability here. We want to make sure you guys are aware of it. But then everything else is kind of like what you were saying before. Now, when you go to something like Minecraft, one quick workaround for that, I would say, is working in the homes, a private server on your phone over the Wi-Fi. Okay, let's go. Whether or not the actual play of Minecraft is part of your therapeutic approach, that's up to you as a therapist, and how you decide you want to play in that sandbox, right? There was recently a training I took with Dr. Jessica Stone on how to use Animal Crossing in therapy. And so what she did was she broke it all down. I used it as an excuse to buy Animal Crossing for the office, not for myself. For the yeah,
for the business.
For the business. Yeah. So
talk to my Oculus Quest, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's coming up later on this year. But then the idea was, in that particular game, in order to jump into somebody else's island, there's random codes that they'll give you as passcodes to go into the island. So it's not like other systems where you get that person's friend code, like or you get the gamer tag or anything like that. No, it's this game has a separate set of passwords. You know what? Nintendo did a good job with that. When it comes to a game like Fortnite, yeah, this is where it kind of gets tricky. Do you have obviously you're not going to have a business agreement with Microsoft. You're not going to have a business agreement with Epic. I guess the question in that case would be, do you have a separate gamer tag for yourself in the office? Mm-hmm. And if you're going to go that route, for those specific games. For other games, we could talk about how we use them in the office, but that would be my response there.
I totally agree. I've not done, I don't think I would do Fortnite anyway, just because that's not my jam. I'm happy to let kids tell me about their Fortnite experiences and be very excited.
Did you try it yet? Is that the issue?
I'm not interested.
I just can't kill anyone.
I'm not, but I have, it's a really different, I think I blew a few kids' minds actually over the last few months, because they would want to bring their tablets in and they'd want to, and we do a little show, but I was not really gonna, we're here to play together and do something. We're in the room together. We need to be present, doing this stuff. But now that we're not, I've actually had a couple kids where, I made my own account on Minecraft and, they've invited me to their world. I did make one mistake when I did not fully understand how all of it was set. And I had two kids who are kind of connected to me, and they didn't realize that they could find me anywhere. And so one kid kind of popped into the other kid's world, and I very quickly shut that down and fixed it and made it okay. And they're, I think the anonymity of the names is, they don't know who the other kid is. That was my mistake. And so knowing those settings, of course, probably the people listening to this probably know that better than I would. But I found Minecraft is great. For a couple of kids, one in particular who's really not a very social or very pro-social kiddo, he invites me to his world, he gets to show me some stuff, and then he tries to beat the crap out of my character. And so we've done a lot of practice of like, I'm not as good at this as you are, and it feels like you're bullying me. It feels like you're beating up on me. I feel like I don't really have a chance here. And, you know, that back and forth of like negotiating with taking some time for him to teach me some tricks so that I can kind of actually start to do well, or give me some armor so I'm not like the most vulnerable person in the world, has really worked in kind of balancing him, you know, work on kind of like, we want to play together, but when you want to play with someone else, it's not always I'm the best and the other person, you know, or you're laughing at me and I'm not doing well and that makes me feel bad. So this really embodied experience, and you know, we're on Doxy, we're looking at each other and looking at our, you know, our device, and that has been interesting, to say the least. I think for me, it was a stretching me and myself in a new way.
Awesome. Brian, were you gonna say something, or?
I was thinking of a couple things. It's like, especially with Minecraft, the idea of you could just play hide and seek. You could, I had one situation where recently I was playing, you know, with the kid in their home, and the way it worked out was we were very far apart. We really couldn't find each other. So it's just, all right, I'm gonna build this gigantic tower with this big flag on it, you know, in every direction, and just start walking in towards the sun, and like maybe you'll find it, you know, like stuff like that. And or even this is something you have mastery in, and let me show you something I have mastery in. And then that's when I take it to Marvel vs. Capcom, and they don't want to play that again. And then that's how I've taught my lesson. Like, hey, maybe you should ease up a little bit in order to, like, you know.
What I'm hearing is you should take them on Mortal Kombat and finish them often.
Yeah, just finish them. Yeah,
the bloody finishers.
Yeah.
And then.
Oh my gosh! And then the mom comes in and starts playing against us, and it was like, all right, cool, I like this. This is what family time should be in a home. No.
I also think you can really, you know, I've had some really good luck with analog games via telehealth. So, yeah. You know, telehealth and not digital gaming, but like hide and seek. I have, you know, some little kiddos, and it's great where, you know, it's hide and seek. Where are you? Can I find you? The kid goes and hides, and then the caregiver just carries the laptop around and like points me at the room, and I'm like, well, let's look over there. Look cool. Under that chair. And then I get to hide, and she'll like shove me under a cabinet, and I'll just be sitting in the dark for a little while, and the kid gets to come find me. And there's been some really nice, and I'm a play therapist by background, and I'm an attachment kind of mindset by background. And so for, you know, some of my kids with some real attachment trauma, these little guys are like this, I see, you know, that same joy of reunification and the reconnection. You know, the themes there have been really, really beautiful. And also I've had sword fights. I cast them to the television, and we have a room that's pretty empty because luckily we've had the benefit of our martial arts school has been doing virtual Zoom classes. So we've converted one of the rooms in our house to just the room that we do martial arts, but it has a TV, and I can cast my device so that I can see the kid big, and they can see me standing full tall in the room, and they bring out their sword and I bring out my bow staff, and we just have like full body kind of like sword fights or dance parties. I've shared YouTube videos. I have a friend who really, really loves Mario music, and he played all of so there's like a loop of all of the newest, I think it's the 3D Mario game. I'm so not.
Yeah, 3D All-Star just came out.
Yes. So the whole soundtrack is on YouTube, and so we played it, and it's like each song is like a minute or so, and just huge dance party, and had this great like, and this kid who is not super regulated in general was actually able at one point to look at me and go, this music makes me feel like dancing in a really different way than the last music. And I was like, it totally does. Like, isn't that funny? You can listen to something and it changes how you want to move your body. And he's like, yeah, this one is twirly. And it was beautiful. So there's been some really amazing moments over the virtual therapy. And I think in the individual work, in the family work, and in the group work, my fellow play therapists, we've all been like, it's not terrible. You know, we kind of went in like, how is this going to work with these? I mean, I've had puppet play with 2-year-olds over the telehealth, and I don't know if this is not game, but gaming and play, right? Like, and this, you know, kids coming in, and my alligator is biting at the screen, and his alligator, you know, is coming and biting at mine, or ow, you hurt my ear, you know, and and that, like, this is how they would play in my office. Like, it was just because there was a laptop, I was amazed at like, this is the same work. They're doing the same work. And that's, so it's not the same, it's not as good, but it's not terrible, I found. And that's been helpful.
Yeah.
In my resilience.
Good. And to get back to the question, it sounds like the summary is do as many steps as possible to keep that confidentiality, and that you're not mixing your private, because I think that's one thing that keeps coming up as a theme is, I love Minecraft, but I should probably buy a separate Minecraft or even start a server to do it for the business or for whatever, because there is so much of a temptation sometimes to accidentally slip into more information about yourself or that kind of stuff, or, you know, those little slips, I guess. But yeah, definitely. And confidentiality is a huge thing too. So getting people to sign off on what you're doing exactly, informed consent, all that kind of stuff can sometimes, from what I'm hearing, bypass a little bit of that, you know, gray area of, if you ask your college or your association, they're going to go, mind what?
And I did not do, like, anytime the couple kids that I've done mine, like, I was made sure, like, I got that parent, like, on the screen, like, I want to ask you this, does this feel okay? Here's why, you know, and so, like, yeah, it's all, you know, permission first, go for that.
One thing to like kind of bounce off what you were saying about that change for the telehealth, to going on to the telehealth. For us, one of our big things when we first started gaming approaches was, because of the clients that I had, and a lot of them, you know, had sensory processing issues. They were either like addicted to their devices, or, and addiction is the wrong word, but in this case, it's, this is all you're doing, and I need you to learn something else, right? Like, and so when we first started, it was, we're just going to use board gaming, role-playing, and storytelling games. And it was going to all be analog. So, and for a lot of my clients, I was like, no, we're not bringing any video games into the office. I want, you know, what if we could still do the same type of things, but in a different way, and try to figure out how that would look, how that would be different. So for a lot of my clients, it's like, oh, great, we finally get to use video games with the therapy. And I'm like, oh yeah, we're going to use video games. They're all turn-based board games, you know, or turn-based strategy games. So it was kind of like still trying to keep that feel, even though it was making that move. Because I told them, you're playing enough of your video games at home, and if there's a reason why you feel like you need to show me, other than me just watching you play and you not interacting with me, you know?
Yeah.
Mary, I'm seeing you type about not finding a good Uno substitute. I haven't used it, but one of my colleagues, other play therapist, uses unofreak.com, and she's used that in a lot of sessions. So that would be one to check out. And then I actually do Uno. They have the cards, and usually if there's an adult that is, you know, it becomes a family game, and they have cards for me that are in a pile in front of their computer, and they'll hold up what I have, and I'll tell them what to play. And I've played Uno, I played War. I do Question War as one of my kind of structured play therapy activities, where if you win the trick, you get to ask any question of the other person that you want. And I just use a full deck, and they use a full deck. And if I lose the cards, I throw them to one side where I can't reuse them. And if they do the same, right? Like, so if I win, then they throw those cards to the side, to be able to do that with distance. Trying to think of other, I mean, I have other kind of analog game strategies.
Nice.
I'm just double checking real quick, opening BlueStacks up on my PC to see if Uno is on it. But essentially, if you can use any Android app you can play off of your PC through BlueStacks. Yeah, well, not any. There is some limitations, but most of the traditional board games and like even not so traditional board games, like we were playing Galaxy Trucker, we were playing certain games, and we talked about this previously, that certain games that I would not have brought into the office because I think they were too long or too fiddly, I was able to play on a turn-based like online format like this.
Okay. There's two other questions about confidentiality, playing in homes, potential for people to be in backgrounds, distractions at home, stuff like that. I think that would be best covered if we talk a little bit about HIPAA and ethics.
Mm-hmm.
Just using the cam and stuff like that, or using online pieces. Yeah, if anyone wants to speak first, they can. Otherwise, I can talk a little bit about that.
Part of our transition was everybody we had a consent form. This is going to be really different. We are going to do the very best we can to create a safe, confidential space in our homes as the therapist. And we encourage you to just be, the onus of responsibility, unfortunately, with telehealth is that it is on you to then do the best you can to find a space for yourself. And I mean, I know I have had colleagues who've really had to, they've really had to work with people on this. And I'm sure the people out there who also have experienced this of, the only place a person can find privacy is in their car. In the bathroom. One of my colleagues has 3 teenage children and his wife is a therapist, and so he sent everybody at the agency a picture of his home office, which was a lovely setup from what you could see from behind him, and then the view of what it really was, which was him sitting on the toilet doing therapy. And so I mean, I think we've all kind of had that adjustment, and just being really explicit about it. And if people are really concerned, talking with them about it on the phone. A lot of those therapists will maybe do phone sessions. What I've talked about with people I supervise a lot actually is when we went through this transition, is how, and if you've done home work, how much more like a home visit telehealth feels than an in-office visit. And so I think for me too, shifting my mindset to the ethics and values and the ways that I would approach going into someone's home as a home visitor or as doing family in-home work, that's how I address doing teletherapy with people, is that it's really, I get it. I normalize what your space is. You do not have to have a perfect environment. You can be wherever you want in your home. Just really validating that it feels invasive. And I think a lot of people, and maybe other people have felt this too, I felt that it was so much more reciprocal though from a home, because they're also visiting my home. They've all met my dog. They've all, they've gone with me. My dog is downstairs. They've asked to see her. I carry the tablet downstairs. I'm prudent of what is around me when I'm doing that. But there's been in some ways a different intimacy with families. I think that this is not a panel about COVID and telehealth and gaming, but we're doing this because of COVID. And I think the fact that everyone is going through this as a crisis, and I don't know if other people felt this way, but the families were caring for us as much as we were caring for them in this, because we all know this is messed up and weird and nobody knows what's going on and it's hard. So I think that there was some interesting, kind of relational dynamics too, in terms of security and those kinds of pieces with switching to doing this.
Yeah, I mean, what we did as an agency and what I've done for private practice is I took a training in, there's no board certification, no certification in online therapy or online practice here in Canada that I know of. So it's basically people who provide training in general. And as part of the certification, a lot of what they were talking about was when you're doing your session 0 with people, when you're doing your intake, it's really making sure, and addition to, I'll keep things private, what's between you and I stays here, I can only preach if there's risk, for children, self, or others, that kind of stuff. But what you really emphasize then is, since we're doing this at home, please dress appropriately, be mindful of what's around your surroundings. Please inform me if you're at a different address than what's listed, because if there's anything that happens, I'd like to know where to send authorities and stuff like that, and to help. Please, make sure you're in a private space. Inform me, and I will inform you if there are other people behind or around or anything like that. It's setting out those boundaries at the start, because if they're ever kind of broached later, you can have a discussion of, hey, we kind of talked about this before. Yeah, don't go to the washroom through mid-session, definitely. I mean, I've had to ask people using their tablets or their phones not to put it on their chest, because I can't see their face. So it's that idea of, just being cognizant that although you're using your personal technology, because I do see a lot of people for intensive therapy on their phone, like their phone. And so, things like that, where basically you're making sure that you have their address, you have their emergency contacts if something happens, you are viewing them in their background, in their safe space. But in the same sense that you will have to report things if you see things, and you will have to discuss things if you see things. So I think being cognizant of that is huge when it comes to the new kind of intake that we're doing. And ethically, there's a lot of things surrounding, if you see something, you need to talk about it. Like a kid runs by and you see some sort of abuse, or like, if the person is, has a bunch of stuff in the background that you don't want to see, stuff like that. So it's important to bring that.
I have also been taken to the bathroom. I work with 5 and under.
There's
definitely been times where I'm like,
at least you were thrown into the toilet, like, and splash.
That's harder, Mary.
Yeah. But I do have people who they're like, I can see in the background their spouse is sitting on the couch.
Yeah.
And so then you're saying, you reiterate, hey, I know we talked about having safe space and having your own stuff, but I can see your spouse back there. What's going on with that? Why is that kind of happening? That kind of piece, right? Or if people, if there's construction going on in the background, or their internet's not very good, I think that's been a huge issue going forward. At first, Ontario here in Canada went through this Ontario Telehealth network, where people could do it from home, but it was just terrible quality. So as soon as we moved to the healthcare Zoom, it was much, much better, and things were nice. But again, there's internet concerns as well, right? At what point do you end a session when you're like, look, I can't hear you, I can't see you, this isn't working, let's do it by the phone, that kind of piece. Brian, do you have anything?
Well, the whole, pretty much a lot of that you guys hit on, but one of the major differences is that I was coming from being an in-home practitioner. So the idea of going into the home wasn't different for me. It wasn't different for them in that regard. One of the major differences for me was I'm still in my office. And that created a very different, just really changed the whole setup for us in the office, because it's like, all right, well, I'm not going to be driving for half an hour from one client to another, right? And so it changed that in that regard. Now, these are concerns that are like all concerns in the in-home field to begin with, right? And so what happens is like, these are like, oh, how do you make sure that HIPAA is compliant in the home? Well, is that your home? Like, it's not your office. You're not going to be able to make it like some kind of perfect, like, sterile environment. You are going to have people walking in and out. You are going to have, this is going to happen no matter how. I mean, I was inside a home once, and like the cops came crashing in next door, and like everybody ran out, Or I was in a home once, and like the person next door was having a heart attack, and it was kind of like, all right, we stop what we're doing, we go next door, and we call the EMS. So those are all things that, they can happen, and being aware of that. But this is also part of the ground rules you set. And it's not just ground rules for them, it's ground rules for yourself. And you tell them, look, if somebody walks into this room, I'm going to be super vague. I'm not going to go into detail anymore, and I'm just going to keep it vague because I don't know who that person is. I don't know what you're comfortable talking about in front of that person. I'm going to follow your lead. The same thing happens when in the community. I've had clients in the past that were from the same town that I was living in at the time. And, you know, if I run into you at the supermarket, I'm going to keep walking. I don't know who you know, and like, I'm going to follow your lead. I'm not going to introduce myself. God knows how many times I've been called somebody's older brother or like whatever, just like, you know, cousin or something in the field, just because adjusting to the fly for what's going on. And it requires a lot of flexibility for the telehealth and for the in-home on the therapist end, not just on the family.
Yep, absolutely. And I'd say, you know, I'm sure every college or any sort of governing body is going to say, if you can't guarantee at your place that you can have a secure office or a, you know, non-interrupted space and time, then you should be providing the service probably at the least, sort of thing. So, you know, not to be strict like that, but I think, you know, it's going to be stricter on yourselves than it's going to be on the client, right? The last question I see here that I love is patients who want to do things like shopping, driving, or doing something else. Yeah, and again, it's that idea of it depends. Yeah, you don't want it. But I mean, it also depends on the therapy you're doing, right? Are you checking in for that? I mean, I don't even want to get into that kind of, just no. Because I want to say out loud, because I do employee assistance plan, supportive counseling, where 90% of my day is just, And have you thought differently about that? Because they provide 1 session or 3 sessions, and you're supposed to support someone without giving treatment. So the part of me wants to say yes, like absolutely. If they're driving or something, then, you know, and they're engaged and that kind of stuff. But really the question is, why do they want to do something else while you're with them? If you're delivering psychotherapy, if you're delivering treatment, if you're engaging with somebody in this therapeutic process, why do they want to do something else during it? You know, this isn't a podcast or an audio book that you can clean during, you know, sort of thing. Like, I guess the root of that for me is, why do they feel the need? And so for me, I've actually brought it up in session. I've watched somebody go and stir a soup and then start like serving it, and I'm like, is your generalized anxiety so focused that you need to get this done and not be judged for not having lunch on time, that you're going to do this during session? And she's like, yes, I feel like I need to do this. If I don't, I can't let that pot sit for another 5 minutes. And then we use that in session to talk about generalized anxiety, all the thoughts that come up for the CBT process of like, I'm a bad mom or this or blah, blah, blah. But again, I remember having to set that boundary of, put the ladle down. I don't want you serving something while we're talking, because it doesn't need to be done. You can wait 5 minutes. Or they had their kid in the background and they're like, and I'm like, they're fine. They're 11. Set those boundaries. You don't need to attend to them. You're not a bad parent if you're just going to finish up your session here. You know, it's things like that. So again, that main question comes back to me about, why would they feel like they need to do things while this is going on? And it also sets a priority kind of piece where, you know, Brian, we talked about before with homework, but I mean, like, you know, it's that idea of like, well, what are you setting this therapy as a priority if you feel like the only time you can compete is basically sacrificing our time for shopping or whatever?
And I mean, just as a counterpoint, I have a colleague who was doing, you know, the caregiver is a grandparent raising grandkids, and they were doing a phone session, and she's like, it sounds like you're out and about. And she's like, yeah, I'm on the line for the food pantry. So she did a whole session with this caregiver because that was the only time that this person could also get in line to get food, right? So, you know, there's also like, why is it's just a necessity, and also
then move the session, right? Yeah.
Well, yeah. She needed she needed the, you know, the caregiver needed the support. I think, you know, and rein me back in, but I think, you know, you're a person working with kids through this, like seeing what people who have children have been going through.
Oh yeah. If it's crisis or if it's competing, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it does depend on the situation.
Needs at the same time, then great.
I think it depends on the situation. I've heard in recent weeks a kid getting like detention or something for being online in school and then going to go get something to drink, right? Like, so she got punished for going to get something to drink. Her response is, who the hell are you to tell me when I can get something to drink in my own home? You know? And so I think
there wasn't a digital hall pass.
Yeah, but you know, but I think that's where that back and forth with the in-home, like there and that need for a little bit more flexibility. There is a strength that comes from, they are so comfortable with you to have this conversation in the home that they're just doing what they would normally do. So there is some positive with that. I do think there is, if it's distractions to the point where that we're not getting to the point, well then, yeah, if it's just this is something they might be fidgeting with in the home to help them keep their focus, kind of keep that in mind. Because again, we are also talking about working with younger kids. And so I understand there's differences between that and adults. But I do think for the question, the way it was phrased, I do think there is a time and a place for you to be with them when they go into a social setting, to be earbuds in their ear, and they can talk to you and calm down while they're going through this thing in real life. So I think there's a venue for the telehealth in that way, but it is something that you would have to set up and decide ahead of time and kind of plan that all. That's
part of the treatment. For exposures, yeah, like doing specific exposures about let's walk in the mall together, or PTSD treatment. Let's go walk to the site together. Let's go coach you through that kind of stuff. Yeah,
like in vivo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mary's talking about some of the like watching parents with their children in their home, and I'm I mean, I'm not a PCIT trained therapist, but in some ways it feels like that, right? It's like I'm in her ear while her kid's having a tantrum, walking her through it, and coming to a different outcome maybe if they were by themselves.
And I think these are a little different than shopping.
Yes.
Actually, but driving is a good example because they're driving to make your appointment. So do you penalize them because they're late and they're trying to make it to get home to talk to you? And again, that's a discussion with them at the time, because if they're always driving, then, or if you're driving for PTSD treatment and you're doing exposures of being in the car and then talking them through it. So.
Then back to what you're back to siding with you on the issue as well is if they're driving, how's their internet connection? And so that might be something to talk about. And I've had that happen a couple times where it's just like, oh, this is the only time you have, and you could tell the mom is handing the cell phone to the back of the car, and there's been times where I've had to call them out on it. Well, no, this is their time. If they cannot meet this time, do you need to? It depends on the situation. But it is one of those, well, is this group not appropriate for you because you can't meet the conditions to attend this group? Because there is still the whole needing to be able to attend and be willing to join.
And I think that the other parallel, that just general distractions question that was in the question Q&A as well, of just naming it. If there's something kind of tuning you out, I mean, what is that? And you probably heard, I live in a place where there's a lot of people with no muffler. And we get the really loud rumble like multiple times. And, it's just not, that's a car going by. Sorry for the interruption. I've had during one of my groups, I had, the kid, I don't know how those headphones with the things, I thought they were supposed to keep all the sound, but I could hear everything this kid's family was doing with their dinner prep. And they were having a great time, but they were also, I just was like, hey, kiddo, just go let your family know that everybody here can hear that. Nice. Like, hold on. And it got real quiet after that, right? So just being clear and transparent, like, yes, we can hear you, just hamming it up over what's going to be for dinner. And
now there is something to play with and tease with in this regard. As from an in-home therapist perspective, which is this a distraction for you and not a distraction for them? Because this is their family, this is their home, and this is what normal is for them. Now, it might be a distraction for you, and it might also be a situation in which, well, the kid's going to have trouble doing their homework because there's no, so in some ways you need to see it as well as a therapist, and then see, is this a potential strength that they have and something that you need to work through or work with? Or is this something that, well, I might be uncomfortable with it, but I'm the one in their home. And if, you know, I don't know how much this kid actually wants me here, you know, like depending on the type of services you're offering.
Yeah. So I think, again, as a summary to this sort of thing, it sounds like when things are discussed and then when things are planned, it's a much more inclusive activity than if you have to yell at someone to drop the ladle. But I mean, you know, it's that idea of looking for therapeutic benefits and looking for therapeutic process in what's going on, as opposed to just, you know, throwing the whole thing out, if that makes sense. So
One of my favorite professors in graduate school, when you know, he would talk about it's all grist for the mill, right? So every one of these moments is a conversation that then has therapeutic value at some point.
Mm-hmm. And you can tell a lot about what's going on from presentations that just kind of pop up. You know, like I can tell a lot from families who, when I invite them for the first session, like I invite one individual person for the first session and they bring their whole family to back something up, it tells you something, even though you didn't invite any of them. And when, again, you tell them not to bring the whole family and they do, it tells you something even more. So it's that idea of there's a way where it also gathers information like, this person feels comfortable enough to do this while shopping. Let's talk about that a little bit. Like, why do you feel comfortable enough to talk out loud? Like, are you worried at all about talking out loud in the shopping center? Is there a rush for this? How do you feel about shopping that you're doing these two competing things at the same time? So there's plenty of grist for the mill as well.
I've also felt like, and I'll stop at this, but just from me and my supervisees, even just talking about how, especially when it's a phone session and it maybe isn't a video session, the content feels different. And actually the therapists notice their energy field. And I said, we're so much, it's state trait experience, right? I think it's so natural to be on the phone while you're shopping for some people that they wouldn't think twice. Why? It's just because it's my therapist. I'm used to doing it this way.
Yeah.
And their nervous system is wired to make that safe, right? And that's interesting, you know, that, I don't know.
No, I think it's a valid point, definitely. I you know, if you have a temptation that if you know of a client you're working with, maybe this is more for the telephone therapy, and you think I could probably play a video game while doing this, maybe the client might feel the same way at some point. Totally unethical, but the idea again is that it's that even that will tell you, you know, if the other person feels okay with shopping over the phone or because they're used to doing that kind of stuff over the phone, it tells you maybe where their priority is on the problems that they're talking about, right? As well.
Speaking of which, Uno does work on BlueStacks. Not that I'm playing it, just that, you know, it does work.
I feel comfortable enough in this panel to maybe try it out right now.
Well, what is it called again, Brian? BlueStacks?
Yeah, it's something you can download on your PC. It's called BlueStacks. Now, I would say to be careful with this. If you're somebody who has a whole bunch of appointments on your Google account, because BlueStacks will connect to your Android device or whatever your Google accounts are. And so if you could be in the middle of a session and then have your calendar pop up on the game because it's connected to your phone in a way. So keep that in mind. It might be another one of those situations where you might want to use a different email address or a different account to set up your BlueStacks. But like, I probably have at least 40 games on this. And I'm talking about like everything from Clue to Cthulhu, you know, like, yeah.
Nice.
I think that's been so interesting. I mean, that's one of my ethical kind of headspaces with the gaming groups in particular, because those are my oldest kids actually, is like I said, it's easier for them with the Google Meet because they are so much more familiar, and they've actually exponentially become more tech savvy in the last 3 months. That's so interesting to have watched. But that means they have my email, right? They're getting, the parents and them are getting invites to their account from my Google Meet to their email, and they are able to email me, which has opened up really interesting opportunities for our groups. But it for me has also been a place of like really establishing boundaries of like, you may not, you know, don't contact me like if you need to talk to me. I had one kid, you know, because he had my email, was like, I'm having a very hard day. Can I please talk to you sooner than Tuesday? And I was like, oh yeah, no, that's not how we're going to do that. Like, just like anything, if you need me, please, you still need to talk to your mom, and I'm happy. I will try to find time to talk to you, but email is not, that's not what this is for. And they've all, you know, again, I've found everybody been very respectful of that, but it was needing to be very clear about that and how to use that to, you know, if you want to send me the backstory on your character, great, that's fine. I don't want to hear about how you had a bad, you know, how your day was. That's for our session, or if you need to talk before our session, you need to talk to your parents and they'll call me.
The next topic beyond this is billing and session running. For billing, I guess what I could just ask in general is that if does anyone have any specific questions about billing? Because I know it's very technical.
The most fun thing to talk about.
Yeah, the most fun thing to talk about, technical, and I can only help Canadians. So does anyone have any specific questions about billing in any way? If you do, you can definitely write an open question, and we will definitely try to answer it. And by we, I mean Eric and Brian. And session running. So I guess that can run in session running, and tips and tricks are kind of things that can be grouped together. If anyone has any prompter questions for running sessions or tips and tricks and stuff like that, definitely put it in the Q&A. Yeah, I guess. Because I run private, but then I also run friendly D&D games, stuff like that. So I'm using Fantasy Grounds, I'm using Roll20 for Cthulhu, for 10 Candles, for other things like that. I don't know. I think what's interesting about just from the start is it's the financial aspect that you want to put into it when it comes to running sessions, because, you know, with places like Fantasy Grounds, you buy modules, you can have every single thing there, you have maps, you have group loot, you have assigning, you have your character sheets online, everything's all put together, but it costs money, you know. And then you look at Timothy, did you have something you wanted to say?
No, he definitely didn't.
Or is it okay that your mic was off anyways?
It's probably preferred that his mic is off, I think is what we're,
okay. Well, you do have the ability to speak. Do you want me to unspeak you?
No, it was definitely better that I didn't say anything.
Okay, good.
Oh,
I do have a question about telehealth and billing. So in my state, they have waived the cost and issues with telehealth. That used to be there for some insurances, so currently we don't have to worry about those things. Hopefully that stays the same. How's it been in your state in Canada? I appreciate that you added Canada so I could talk a little bit.
aww.
That's nice. I'll tell something really short of when it comes to billing and stuff like that. I went and talked to the college about where I could do things online, and they said you have to talk to the individual other province that you want to work with. Some don't care in any single way, others do, and so it was kind of an iffy thing. I think they've stated a lot more stuff now that COVID's come out and that we have to. But I knew family doctors that have moved to Tahiti and still have Skype sessions with their clients for money somehow. Well, I don't want to talk about that, but the idea basically is that with billing and such, the confidentiality was huge. Like getting someone to sign, basically saying, "Hey, I know this was before Zoom was big and before the healthcare HIPAA stuff was basically big, and it was just basically saying, hey." You know, here's confidentiality. Skype is not as secure as it could be. Everything's kind of sent through the States. Are you okay with that? You know, and if people are okay with it and then they sign off on that, then that's how we kind of proceeded forward that way. But I'm sure the college is now much more specific about it. And I'm sure if people watch this recording from Canada, they'd be like, it was always specific. You just didn't look it up enough. But again, you know, it just depends. And that's all I'm going to say on that.
Same in New York. A lot of the insurances, you know, waived copays for telehealth or covered copays. If you don't maybe already noticed, I am actually the eternal cynic. So I found that experience and that plan on their part was a good way to make it so that we got paid less. because they didn't have it. And it's hard to change your whole system. I'm sure there's, you know, no button at Aetna where you could push it and say, don't charge anyone a copay, but maybe there should be. And because they didn't push it, and then you bill, and then, you know, you're not getting that 20% of what you would have been getting, and you have to go through the whole process of rebilling, which was a real pain in the ass. And I would imagine saved them some money from people who didn't bother to rebill. But for the most part, once it got ironed out, it was okay. And then it's slowly been drawing back for the covered of copays around here. Still, some people are. I think one of the best things that came out of this is that I think for New York State, Medicaid and Medicare has finally like made it so you can do telephone sessions. Funnily enough, Medicare was the last place in New York, or the last insurance provider to actually approve doing a phone session with somebody, which was like it's a huge percentage of our geriatric population who probably don't want to use a computer actually. Yeah, exactly. And that was but for the most part, I've had the question. Some like privately chosen plans did not waive those copays, and so I've made it my practice that for the people on my caseload in my private practice who did not have that option, I've given them the option and said, listen, your plan seems to want you to keep paying a copay. Nobody else has to do that right now. So if that's a burden, like, please just let me know and I'm going to waive it and write off that $20 or whatever. So that's kind of how I've approached that.
So for us, the way New Jersey was working, they were like, just right off the bat, waive all copays. So we did that, like, and we're still doing that. Now, when it comes to billing, if you look at how you put the billing codes in, there is a spot for in-home versus in-office, because like there's a thing you could click or a number you could put in that will be the difference between in-home versus in-office. Insurance companies aren't going to pay you any more for in-home versus in-office. It's still whatever the same billing code is, and they don't care about the modifier. Now, on the insurance end, you change that to telehealth, they're not going to pay you any more or any less that I've seen yet. Okay, so even in your state, it's been the same with that regard?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's how are you, but with the state was different. The state wanted us to double up all of our notes, redo our notes on the, yeah, this was ridiculous. So you put the note in through their special program that doesn't work, and you put it in once for actually seeing the client, then you put the note in again for seeing the client doing telehealth. And it was like, oh, so you want me to double up all my notes for your back end yeah, exactly. So I was like, nah, you know. So there was problems with that in that regard. Now, one thing to keep in mind, if you're someone who is not doing your own billing or has not gotten onto panels yet for insurance, there's a difference between a copay and a deductible. And that difference can make or break what you do in this situation. Because some insurances will tell you you can waive the insurance company doesn't care if they're like, oh, you want to waive the copay? Go ahead, we don't care. Like when it comes, so I had a family that I was seeing, and I knew what they were going through. I agreed to waive the copay. I was like, let me call the insurance company and let me ask them if I can do this. They're like, yeah, whatever, we don't care. You know, they didn't care. I didn't have to make any changes to my documentation process. Now, when it comes to deductibles, that is different. I am not, because of my contract, I am not allowed to waive their deductible. And the reason for that is that deductible is going towards a total amount that they have to pay off before the insurance kicks in. And so it depends if you're on panel. If you're on panel and you have that contract with them, you cannot waive the deductible. I have not heard even if during COVID we can waive the deductible, because it is still something that the insurance wants. And that's part of the contract you signed to be on panel.
And I don't see that benefit lasting much longer, but.
Yeah.
Does that answer the question? Yeah. Okay, cool. Good. Questions are being answered. I clicked dismiss, but they're not being dismissed. So yeah, tips and tricks. I'm sure, Brian, you can add on to what I'm going to say, because I'm going to talk a little bit about what I learned in my online training. But look into the camera, not into the screen. Make sure your hands are being seen when you talk. Otherwise, it's wasted potential of all these hand motions that I'm using here that you can't see at all. Wear pants and other things. Make sure your office is actually an office and there's nothing in the background. There's a lot of interesting ways to engage people when doing the video piece, to make sure that you know, that they are engaged in a session in general. It's keeping that eye contact, lowering the amount of side talk that's happening if you're running a group, that kind of stuff. But in general, I think the more, like, what the number one thing I got from my training was basically the number one issue, or the biggest boundary or barrier to doing this, is the therapist. Their belief that this is a modality that will be actually functional and will assist. Because the more you apologize for being on video, the more you apologize for this as a way of going forward, the more you're instilling that into your client or whoever you're working with, that this is lesser and it will be lesser and it might not be as successful. And I mean, I can tell you, after doing this for 2 years straight, you know, 8 to 4 every day, seeing people on Zoom, you just start to forget you're on video in general. You know, I see myself and I'm really just seeing if I have a booger or something else. That's about it. You know, that nervousness, the anxiety, all that stuff that comes with it, starts to go away the more you do it. Kind of like exposure therapy. But at the end of the day, you know, you just get used to the modality and you just reinforce that this is the way that things are going forward. And, you know, there's a confidence that it'll be almost the same, if anything. Yeah.
I also found my, interestingly, my individual sessions with the kids got shorter, and my groups got longer. So I typically do 50-minute individual sessions with kiddos when I was seeing them in person, and I moved them all to 45, because that's kind of the, you know, that's the regular individual. You can get away with, you know, 5 minute or 15 minutes or whatever. But that gave me 15 minutes between sessions, which I really needed way more than I did when I was in office. In office, the 10 minutes was fine. And if you have the luxury of having a job, I don't realize there's a lot of places they wouldn't even let you do that with the 10 minutes if you're in a place where it's, you know, churn and burn. But I found, and I felt like, you know, when you work with little kids, 10 minutes of every session is transitioning them in or transitioning them out, or both anyway. So when I didn't have to do that, it's probably they're getting the same amount of time. And yet my groups, I feel like they needed more time to kind of ease in and to connect with each other. They would linger a little longer at the end. And so I've started opening those sessions 10 minutes earlier, or letting them run 10, 15 minutes later, just as we wind down. My groups are typically 90 minutes, but adding more time that way. So I felt that was an interesting discovery on my part.
I think there's like a juggling act we do between the clients we're seeing through insurance and the clients we're seeing through the state. And so our state groups could be anything from 2 to 6 hours a week. My in-home is usually no less than 2 hours a week. So we've been doing this for a couple months, and there's a part of me that's like, I kind of feel like I want to start going to 45-minute sessions. I've been doing 2-hour sessions for years and years now. And the idea of, we have done 2-hour online groups. I have done 2-hour online individuals. And I've been able to maintain that sort of schedule. I know the average group is kind of like 90 minutes, but because of the way we had everything set up, we kept it at 2 hours. It just made more sense because of the timing that we were given by the state. With our kids on bikes, there's times where I feel like 2 hours is not enough. Like we're just once we do that check-in and we go, next day we blink and it's time for the checkout. So it really just depends on whether or not you're hitting that level of flow yourself as a therapist. Is something to keep in mind. But no, this is draining in a different way. I purposely wear red amber tinted glasses. When I was working on my doctorates during the comps and dissertation phase, I was so stressed out. I went to the doctor and I was like, hey, I think I need like glasses. I might be losing my sight or something. And he was just like, no, you got like 20/20 in one eye and then like something better than that in the other. Just stop doing whatever you're doing. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Quit school, yeah.
Yeah, all these years of school I've invested in, I'll just quit right now. At that time, I picked up the Gun Gear gaming glasses, and this is probably like the third set I've bought over the years because I find it helpful, reduces the strain from, and I'll have like less headaches or something. But that's something to keep in mind too, that you might need a break from the visual yourself and might need to take like a couple minute breaks in between your clients and in between your sessions because you could be straining your eyes and your body in a way that you're not realizing, and it's going to come out in your sessions if you yourself aren't prepared for it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I mean that's number one thing I'm talking about when I do the intensive treatment is, yeah, there's anxiety, depression, yeah, but as well, like everybody has a weight on their shoulders right now because it's been so long. And I can only imagine when it's like in the States. Here we get worried in my small town because there's 4 new cases, but still it's the same amount of toilet paper missing from the aisles. So it's that idea that like we're all in it, we're all experiencing it differently, but we all have some experience with it in some way. And so I think that's huge to kind of keep in mind and to reiterate to people over video or anything else, is the idea that, everyone is feeling this weight. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know what's going to happen in the next, because I think a lot of people, when they first started talking about this in March, I had a lot of clients and even other professionals like, oh yeah, by summer or fall, we'll be good. And I'm like, no. I have a Bachelor of Science. No, we are not good. This is going to be a year or two, and it's that idea of just process, right? And just, even the history of other pandemics and such. So again, it's that kind of keeping that in mind that we're all going through something we can share will help with connecting as well.
I don't know if I've shared this story, but I think it's my favorite story about the value of this kind of connection with people at this time. And one of my groups, just as a tip, one of the things that I did when I switched to running groups online, because I'd never run an online D&D group, I was like, I'm not doing that now. Like, I'm adjusting to so many new things. I dropped everybody to a different game, and I said, we're gonna meet online, but we're gonna do a different game just because. And I was like, because I need it to be a little easier for me, because everything's really hard right now, and I need it to be a little simpler. And they knew the game, so we played Monster of the Week instead of D&D for a couple months, and it was great. But one of my groups, which has got like a really good rapport between the kids, they've just been. They've just really been lovely connecting to each other. They were on their monster hunt and they were tracking it through the woods, and they had the trail, and they were like, no. And my professional in the group, which was his playbook, named Chuck Norris Jr., which means, yes, I did get to role play Chuck Norris, his father, who was in charge of Chuck Norris Incorporated, or Kung Fu Incorporated, I'm sorry. Which was the secret government agency trying to eradicate monsters. Chuck Norris Jr. radioed back to the station and had hammocks delivered to them via drone in the woods. And then my initiate, who was part of a futuristic group of supersonic flying rocket boot roller skating team fighters, I think that's the best way to describe it, had some kind of trans-dimensional time travel skill, and she started being like, who wants a frappuccino? And they created the mythology that she had, she could roll magic and had access on a success to a pocket universe that she could reach into and grab people's drinks from Starbucks counters from various parallel universes. And so she just started taking orders from the group and getting them whatever fancy coffee drink they wanted and whatever snacks they wanted. And they spent 45 minutes of their hour-and-a-half session just sitting in hammocks in the woods, drinking fancy coffee drinks and eating waffles and talking and telling jokes and laughing with each other in character. And they did that, and then they the session ended, and then they continued it. They picked up, they stayed there the next session. And I just said to them, like, you guys, it's been 2 months since you've been able to leave your house or see any of your friends. Like, I just want to say, I really love that, like, this is a game about going on a fantasy adventure, and what you're doing is just hanging out with each other and talking about what's going on in your lives. And it's awesome. And they were like, oh yeah, you know, whatever. And I was like, but it was amazing. I mean, I still get chills thinking about it, because it was like, it was so telling to me about the value of being able to do this on the computer in this way at this time, right? That just, you know, really was keeping kids going and giving them some really important space.
It greatly changed the types of games that we were using. We were doing more games like for the clean, we were doing skeletons, the quiet year. We had just started a Fate Core game. Fate, I think we were kind of debating between Fate Core, Fate Accelerated. And, you know, other cooperative board games in the office. And then this hits, and it's like our fate group just fell apart. Like you know, like turned on each other in a way that was like, oh, okay, didn't see that coming. And because it's like online, and because it's like, oh, I could just shut it off. You know, we were dealing with young adults, and the guy's like, no, I'm done, and you know, that was it. And we wound up going to Kids on Bikes afterwards, and finding that really fit the group that we had and really fit the direction that we wanted to go. Right now, everything with COVID, and as we're learning how to use Roll20 for the first time, because we weren't really using it at all. Like, we had to, like, at that trip back from Maryland, it was stop and buy a bunch of stuff on Roll20 that we might use, and like get that up and running and get that going. But one of the other major differences, like talking about games that I normally didn't have in the office, was Tokaido and Takanoko. And then I was like, oh, you know what? Like, I really wanted to mess with my clients. I'm like, oh, let's play Pandemic. You know, like, I was thinking about like something like that. Like, you know, like kind of like leaning into it, like making it so that, yes, we're all going through it, but this thing is beatable. Right. And so I like wanting to show something like that. But instead of that happening, instead Tokaido happened. And it was, yeah, you guys are all stuck in your house, but now you go on vacation in Japan. And we're playing Tokaido through BlueStacks online. And no, can I do the Japan game again? Can I do the Panda Bear game again? And it's like, it wound up changing the type of games we were playing, and going from almost like you have something like the Forbidden Island, and leaving something like Forbidden Island instead of doing something like Galaxy Trucker, and just setting up how we're going to explore and setting up how we're going to go out and how we're building the spaceship and how we're working together in a different way, because it was, I think the themes in those games was helping, because it was helping giving them a way of imagining themselves being out of their home.
One of the things I really value about talking to you, Brian, is just you have that same kind of encyclopedic knowledge of like all of these games that I just don't have in my repertoire.
Yeah, but I can't touch but I can't use D&D to save my life, right?
No, it's good. It's good. I think one of my other, I mean, and these might be tips that other people probably, if people already, I mean, we all are doing this. So like, but one of the things I came across and found very effective was they had to learn how to interact with each other again online. One of my groups in particular, really, the focus really is on reciprocity and connecting and being like back and forth and serve and return and like put it out, and then the kid picks up and pass and all of that. And in person, they'd gotten very good at it. And then once we got online, it was like, not good at it again at all. And there's the combination of everyone's talking all at once, and then there's the nobody is talking, and I ask a question and it's just like silence. And so what I found is really directly connecting with a person individually at it, like one at a time, in a much more structured way than I would at the table was really useful. And I read this somewhere, the 8-second rule. So if you ask someone a question, give them 8 seconds for them to kind of like process the question and prepare what they wanted to say back to you, especially as they're adjusting to being on the computer and like not knowing how to read anybody, because it was hard to know, are you thinking or are you looking at your, you know, platform jumping game that I kind of hear you tapping on your keyboard. I'm not sure.
How do you know what I'm doing right now?
Yeah, because I can hear the music of your game, and I play games, and I recognize the game.
And I had one kid in particular.
Don't have reflective glasses.
Really tune out, and it was like 50-50. Is it just his processing, or is he like distracted and like on another website? And so we would, you know, we had a very candid talk of like, I said, listen, kiddo, I was saying your name like 5 times and you didn't say anything back, and I need you to say something back. Like if you hear me, I need you to, I'm trying to talk to you because I want you to play. And so what's going to happen is if you don't answer me after I say your name the 6th time, I'm going to kick you out of the meeting. And it's like, but, because I don't think he would notice if I muted him. So it's like, but it's not because I don't want you here. Because I know there's kids that they get kicked out of meetings and they're not supposed to come back. And I was like, I want you here. It's just, at that point, I don't know how to get your attention. So if that happens, just know it means I have something to talk about with you and I just need you to log back in. And his focus really changed. That really helped. I think that was
one of the biggest changes I think that came for me with that aspect of communication. It's and we talked about it the other day. I forgot to bring it up, where you can't see my eyes, right? With these glasses, you can't see my eyes. It's not as intimidating for me to stare at you, right? Because like even though if I look up here, you still don't have that eye contact. For some kids, that would make them nervous. Constantly being stared at the whole time would probably make me nervous too. And so I explained that to them. I talked to them about it, and the idea of, well, I'm purposely going to maybe sit at a side angle but, you know, and maybe if I definitely need to know that we're connected, I'm going to, you know, change the way I'm sitting or focusing. But one of the other unexpected advantages or like opportunities that came up was I have a client, I did lose a couple of my more violent, nonverbal, or low cognitive clients who they really couldn't do the online, or they couldn't do like groups anymore in that online. It's just too much, like sensory issues were just too much, and I couldn't control for that the same way I could in the office. But one of the things that came up was, well, you know what? We're kind of stuck here online. I know you like to play games. We could play Ticket to Ride or whatever. But from here on out, we're only going to use text to talk. And so for this client, it like normalized, since we're texting anyway online, to use a text to talk app on my phone, and that's how we're talking back and forth through the voice on the phone. And this was somebody who really needed to build their communication skills. And one of the things about coming into the office, the mom was like, I really need her to use her tablet more. I really need her to use text to talk more. And I'm like, we're playing Ticket to Ride. You got to text to me what you want to do, because I can't take for granted what it is. So you're gonna have to text it all out. And we went from perhaps she was going to forget her device every so often, to, well, now you're at home, you got either your cell phone or your device. Let's do, like, you know, I committed to using my cell phone that way as well. And we've done 12 sessions straight where that's how we're playing games and that's how we're communicating about our day. And I'm not sure if I would have had that opportunity had we stood at the table in the office. It's just too much you take for granted sometimes when you understand somebody else when they're talking. You know, in a way that that was one of the things the family was happy about, which was like, oh, I understood her, which was cool. But then I'm not forcing her, like I'm instinctively maybe not forcing her to communicate more. and this is what she needed. Like, this was very, like, much more helpful in that way.
I also used a lot more kind of contrived dyadic conversations. Rather, there was not as much spontaneous role play in the groups as we were doing online as we've moved to being on the Meet. And so my style has been a lot more of cueing, like, hey, this just happened between, like, why don't you and you talk about that for a minute? Like, you know, and a lot more structured and directive in a way, kind of creating context for them to actually role play with each other versus, because it wasn't happening as, you know, it went right back to a lot of the, like, well, I'm gonna, you know, I think I just would want to tell him this. Well, why don't you tell him that? You know, like, oh, why don't you two go tell each other that? Like, why don't you talk about the fact that, you know, she cast a spell and then you, a phantom steed, and you immediately killed it. Like, you guys have a chat here, because I think she's upset.
Yeah, that reminds me too, for those who took the 2.0 yesterday with myself, and for, you know, talking over with Jack and stuff, that if you are #blessed with being able to do a 2-practitioner model, you can be much more directive in that fact, where, you know, when we were doing a research study, for example, because that's the most recent role play therapy that we're doing, it was nice. It was nice to have somebody who is doing the actual role-playing piece and managing and GMing, and then somebody on the side who's observing participants, secretly writing to the DM, hey, it looks like this person's, like, not as engaged, or they're really upset, or something happens, and then that other person can message the client directly, privately, hey, is everything good? Is everything going on well? Because there's that idea that you can kind of pick up from the table, but often it's hard to pick up from the table, because if you give people fidgets and stuff, they're in that space, so they don't maybe feel that need to shut down in a much more physical way they would on video. You know, so we would notice when people are starting to shut down and they're starting to disengage, they're just kind of like this, they don't care what they look like on video. And so you end up kind of prompting them, hey, what's going on? You know, to try to get them back in that groove and back into what's going on in general. So, yeah, it's interesting that way too.
The best part is when they do that wearing a giant Fortnite teddy bear helmet. Yeah. That right there, right in my heart. Yep.
Yeah. Do people have any specific questions they'd like? I know we're kind of coming, it ends at 4:30, right? Am I correct?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm the moderator, I should know. But is there any other final question? It's being recorded. It's my first day. You know, is there any other questions that people have that they'd like answered, or anything else that maybe didn't come up in the topics that we're talking about when it comes to essentially telehealth and gaming? I'm using the 8-second rule right now. One thing that comes to my mind that was interesting is that there's a lot more games coming out now that are using different modalities. So one that comes to mind that I still haven't looked at yet, but have, is Alice is Missing, or Alice has Gone Missing, where it's all by text, right? So it's that idea where, you know, there's different modalities starting to come up. I mean, I know for my training for the online piece, we did a lot on email therapy. So really looking at how to engage people in doing, I think their suggested billing, for example, was I send out an email, then they send one back, and I respond, and that was the session, so to speak. And so ideally, for an example, in a lot of those trainings, you'll find you take the person's response and you write in a different color under it, so that when they start reading the 3 response model, they're getting back into the mind frame of when they're asking that question or when they're going through. Some people find it helpful because they have that time, they can sit down and actually answer things in a collected way. They don't have to respond in the moment, they can digest as they're responding, so stuff like that. So
there's a couple video games that are like going into that headspace as well now. There's like either texting, a conversation is going back and forth, or this came up in Dr. Stone's training, which was the idea of like walking stories, or like, have you ever seen Gris, for example? Gris is a game that's on it's on the Switch. I think it's on other systems, and all you're really doing is you're just walking, and you're getting this story in the background from that walk. Florence is another game that's about relationships, and like there's simple like. And Florence is an example of a simple, almost like novel you're playing together, and it's a very beautiful, light game. It's not a lot going on. If you have a way to connect your systems to your PC, you can play like games like Florence. I think Gogora would be another good example. Games that have almost more of like the storytelling element, and it's not about the physical game mechanics as much as it is about the journey. And then sharing that journey with your clients or their families, for example.
Awesome. We do have 2 questions as well. Ericka, did you want to say anything on the previous topic though?
Nope. Go ahead.
So the first question is, how do you keep yourself engaged and focused with client after client, phone contact session after phone contact session? I have to leave this space because this is my office. So I'll have my 8 to 4, and then I'll have my private clients afterwards, and then I will play Dead by Daylight all night long in this room on the PlayStation. And so it's literally just getting out of this room and taking a walk, getting out of this room and just like going somewhere else and doing something else. Because I think there's just, sitting in the same place doing the same thing, although different, of course, right, with different clients. But it's that idea that if you don't break those things up and you don't, they're all self-care principles, but at the end of the day, the 2 things I think that have helped me the most are getting out of this room and just doing something else, physical activity, being somewhere else in general, or essentially looking forward to something, like a go away somewhere for a couple hours piece on the weekends or anything else like that. So what about you guys?
I sit on the floor all day. I was a play therapist, right? So I was on the floor all day anyway. And if I had to sit in a chair, I would want to die. This is my floor play therapy space. These are my arts and crafts and papers. And then these are my toy buckets. And
that was Voltron.
Here, so that they can kind of be in arm's reach. And I'm on the floor on a pillow. But that part of it was shortening the sessions to 45 minutes so that I had that time to get up and go downstairs and pet the dog and walk around. That was huge. And redefining my own boundaries. I think my mantra for the first 3 months of the pandemic was there's no rules anymore. Everything is bled into everything. I'm taking client calls on my personal phone. It's fine. And really dialing that back. These last couple months and being like, you know what, one of my colleagues sent an article and it said something about it was about being a therapist at this time. And I think one of the last lines of it that they shared that was like so poignant to me was, you can't set yourself on fire to keep other people warm. And that space of just like, so that was making sure that I redefined some of my boundaries around when I was working, when I wasn't working, because I never left the house. Taking time off, I've probably taken more days off, even though haven't been sick in this year than I have in past years. Making sure at least once a month I'm taking a day off and I'm not available by phone to anybody was huge as well. And finding as many times as possible that I could connect with my colleagues. I think that's been one of the hardest to working in isolation, is just not having the space to talk about what you're doing with somebody else the way that you do when you work in an agency or you have a team that you see regularly or supervisor that you see in person. So that piece of it was really important, finding space for that.
A pillow for your seat too.
I have a pillow. Yeah, it used to be downstairs.
Because your bum is gonna hurt.
Yes, no, not sitting on hard floor, no, but like a cushion, it helps a lot.
I like 3 of them. As some of the people who are in the chat know, I am the kind of person who doesn't leave myself a lot of free time, and so going into this, it really put a new sense of pressure on us that we didn't have at that moment. because we were dealing with a lot. Our company there had been a fire right next door. We were forced to move from where we were at. There was a lot going on. We were just adjusting into a new location, getting ready to have like our first open house in the new location, and you know, boom, everything hit, and it was like, we got to keep this up and running somehow, and so it added just a different layer of stress that I wasn't necessarily ready for, I would say, because I wasn't taking care of myself as well as I should be. And so it really forced me to take care of myself in a way that's a lot healthier than it took me a while to get to this point, but it's a lot healthier than I have ever really taken care of myself. And so it really, like, it was like, in order for us to keep moving, we're going to have to like really do things a little differently. So one of the first things was, no, I am only doing online from the office. I am not going to do it in my home. I had learned from like years ago, I had my home office, and then that meant that I never really stopped working ever. So I was trying to learn from some of those lessons that, you know, I was hit with hard, you know, it's one of those lessons you just gotta learn. We are really blessed to, like, when we moved to this new location, we were like 3 blocks away from like a biking trail. So it was just like, nope, buy a new bike. Like, Tim's got a new bike, and I bought a bunch of skateboards, and then I injured myself. But that was part of the
It was good while it was good.
Oh my gosh, it was so good. Like I was like, and that was part of it. It was making sure I took time in my day to stop and just go for a ride, and really just break up. And I think that's part of what I was trying to say earlier, which is I think I am going to, at least for the individual hours, start shortening those hours, because I'm working so much and then I lose a whole day just doing progress notes because I haven't left that time in between clients to really work on my progress notes. And so it's a different mentality. It's a different way to take care of yourself, because now you've added a whole extra set of sensory issues that you really wasn't dealing with beforehand. You know, the audio, the visual, being by yourself. There's only so much you can trick your body, and so you kind of have to find what's that thing that helps you, and then do that thing. The other thing that we started doing differently is we started talking to peers in the field a lot more. We started. I was never really GMing, and it was more like I was the co-facilitator, and we met up with Woody from Roll for Change at PAX Unplugged, and he was like, hey, would you like to just like practice GMing together? And I was like, okay. And so like that turned into like a weekly meetup with other peers and professionals in the field, and we were able to talk about what we were going through and play through it in some ways. And then so I was starting to play more in a way that I hadn't been doing before, and even that I think helped us get through this a lot.
And yes, it is Voltron. He is missing an arm. He is an OG.
That's okay.
Voltron from 1981.
Yep, that's the die-cast. I recognize it. It's okay. He's missing an arm.
a good playtime.
Oh my gosh, it's so beautiful.
So we have one more question, and we have 3 minutes. So what I was thinking was, we can quickly answer this one. Jake was just asking about maps, props, music, lighting, and all those environmental variables. What are some ways to translate those into telehealth? You know, again, yeah, there's lots of, yeah, you can take it away. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I'm just thinking of like, you know, with Zoom, you can have music come in from the background, all the way up to, you can send little private notes to people. You can email them, you know, some props and maps and stuff like that. When you get into Roll20, you can use shadows. So you can literally, you can also share screen and do those kind of drawing of maps. I was playing Roll20, and someone was using shadows in a dungeon. So like literally, you have to move your character on the map, and they will only see as far as they should be able to see. without, you know, dark vision or whatever, all that kind of stuff. And so it's just interesting kind of ways where some of those things we've mentioned before can help facilitate more and more and more as you go forward, if that makes sense.
I also farm a lot of that out. I think one of my biggest sneaky tricks over the last few months is to give the kids as much responsibility for things as I possibly can. So I have a kid who volunteered to do music. I don't actually use music very often, but they were interested, and he's like, all right, I'll do it. And so like every once in a while, one of my kids in Monster of the Week was rejected by his high school crush. And he was like, hold on. And he pulled out like the saddest classical music while the other kid role played his whole little heartbreak scene. It was beautiful. It was beautiful. And then they all encouraged him and reassured him. And they had a little like boost him up session afterwards to get over her. It was adorable. So I've given that to them. I've given them as much world building as I possibly can. If they have a town, you know, if we're somewhere and they want to draw a map about it, go for it. You know, like if that's an idea that you have about what this should be, like just my goal is also the more collaborative development and storytelling, the better for these kids. And so that, you know, the more they can do it, yeah, go for it, you guys. I've used them up because they were paper for printing things, but my other joke has been my biggest MVP of quarantine was 2 stacks of printer paper, which is what I would use to lift my computer up high enough so that it is a good view of my face. But it also lets me, now I'm just using books, gives you a surface that's high enough that you could put figures. Well, maybe not here, but you might need one more if I come a little farther away, right? So that I don't know if you guys can see that, but the kids can see the toys. So if I have stand-ins for something, you know, they can kind of see what's going on because the character can stand there and I'll sit back. So I guess creative camera settings. I've also, you can do clipboards with paper and draw the back scene and have the figures in front, and they can like design, like I had one kid, he set up a story on space, and I set the clipboard with the picture and then the figures were in front, and like you could, I don't have an example of that, but that was another trick that I used for some individual stuff.
Yes.
There is an app called Sirenscape that you can use for like ambient music. We used to just have it like on a tablet and just have that play. You could always just have that play in the background. If you go to YouTube, you could look up specific board games and music that people will create playlists for. A good example of that would be Dead of Winter, where they might create like playlists and like sound effects while you're playing. So you're sitting down playing that board game, and then you hear the zombies at the door. So there's definitely ways to get in that that sound and that feel that you're looking for, or even like, you know, just cut the lights in the middle, you know, and now you're telling a spooky story as you're talking.
Yeah.
I would also just, is in my, just as a caution, I think I was thinking about this listening to the music, and the group that does, they chose to have music. It's used very sparingly. I actually have a kiddo with central auditory processing disorder. So it's hard enough for her to kind of hear and process. And if there's background music, it's actually worse. And so, you know, that's another place to make sure you're checking in with people, because I think if you know, the sensory side of it is like, it can be overwhelming, and thinking about maybe in an in-person setting, it works in one way, but it might not always in the video, with the added demands of the visual and the auditory complications of being online.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much to our panelists. Thank you very much for listening to us and asking your questions and everything that's gone on today. I feel truly blessed. It's been awesome. And yeah, if there's any other questions, you guys can email us or the Discord server or anything else in ways of getting a hold of us professionally. So
Yeah, seriously, thank you, and thank you for having us.
yeah. All right, take care, everybody.
This is the awkward part.
Yeah, I'm gonna keep it awkward. I just keep going like this.
It's just like, I'm just gonna wave.
You know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna do what I'll do to my. Here we go.